Hi, today we are in San Jose at the eSilicon office. Hi Jack, who are you and what do you do?
Oh, Martin, thanks for having me on board here. Jack Harding, I'm President and CEO of eSilicon. I'm also a co-founder. We started the business about 15 years ago. And the vision was to put the semiconductor development process onto the internet. We discovered early on that we had some major challenges there. We stuck with some of that business plan, but some of it we put on the back shelf. Interestingly, things have changed for the better in recent years in terms of availability of technology, information flow, and we've now made a major commitment to put our business back onto the internet, and we're making great strides. So it's an interesting back to the future strategy for us, if you will. Fundamentally, we make custom chips. We're a general contractor, if you like, to make some of the world's most complex chips for the world's largest systems companies. And we're among a handful of people that do what we do. We compete mostly with major corporations, about only 2 or 3. And we've carved out a very, very nice niche market for a small company. And we find ourselves with the combination of the internet emphasis and our core competency moving forward aggressively and with great success these days.
What is your background and what or how did it prepare you for starting your own business?
Well, out of my 36-year career, I've been in startups for 30 years. And so I have a strong penchant for working with the new ideas. I think of myself as a builder. I like to think about the future and just find those gaps in the markets that I can exploit with a solid business plan. However, I didn't start that way. My first job was at IBM, which was the opposite of a startup. It was a wonderful training ground, but after several years I decided that my place was in small companies trying to invent markets and businesses as opposed to executing established ones.
Great. And how did you come up with the business idea for eSilicon? And did it change over the year?
Part one of your question is, I was president of a startup company about 20 years ago, software company here in Silicon Valley. And it was acquired by a much larger company, Cadence Design Systems, a large software company that does electronic design automation. And after a few quarters, I became CEO of that company. And I was there as CEO. And from that perch, I was able to see a lot of the trends in the industry. And I was convinced that the industry was going to move to less capital investment, more automation, more internet access, and a much more fluid, flexible model. And I realized that to get that done, I had to be in a brand new company. So I put together a team of trusted allies who I'd worked with for many years, and we started this company, raised about $100 million in the first 4 years, and really we started a whole new industry segment called the fabless ASIC, or fabless custom chip segment. Like all great ideas when you're an entrepreneur, if everyone calls you up and says, this is the worst idea I've ever heard, then you know you're onto something unique. If they like it, it's because someone else is doing it. And so we carved out that part of the market, and within 4 years, virtually 80% of our competitors, large and small, had taken on our business model, and it's that model that we pursue today. Part two of your question, has the strategy changed? Fundamentally, no. We've had to adjust the strategy to economic conditions. We've weathered a couple recessions here globally. We've had different times of financial success, or other times we've had to be very frugal. But we fundamentally have stayed the course and just constantly enhancing our differentiation and our go-to-market strategy. But I can tell you the idea is basically the same.
Okay, cool. Jack, in the beginning, when you said that you raised 100 billion in 4 years, how did you convince investors that fast to give you that much money?
Well, it's a couple things, I'd say. First of all, when you're out raising money, the team makes a big difference. I put together a world-class team of executives, and both technically and commercially. And that went a long way to getting people's attention. But secondly, you have to remember, when we started the business, was right around 2000, and leading into it, 99, 2000, and it was the internet craze, and people were actually taking business plans to an IPO. Raising money was probably easier then than any other time in history. And so we benefited from the very liberal flow of other people's money, as you call it, into our business. But then we had got some very early traction. An important attribute of being successful as an entrepreneur is getting that first, what we call hit record. You know, when you surprise people with a big account or some big success in the market. And we had a couple early successes, and that gave our existing investors and then subsequent investors a lot of confidence in us.
Let's talk about the business model. So what differentiates you in terms of the product from your competitors?
Well, as I mentioned, we make customized chips. In other words, if you were my customer, Martin, you would come in and say, here's my functional design, my ideas for building this chip. Now, I need someone to get it ready for manufacturing by doing the physical design, connecting all the transistors, and then putting it into the supply chain and managing for its life, which might be anywhere from 2 years to 20 years long. To get that done, differentiation comes in many forms. Some of it comes in the form of intellectual property, for which we have a very substantial portfolio. Secondly, it comes from the design methodology, which produces a reliable result. But in our case, it came from two other factors. Now, unlike our much larger competitors who have a single recipe to make a customized chip, they kind of throw everything into their funnel and the chip reliably comes out the back end. They do a good job. Our strategy was different. We said to our customers, we will work with any combination of any supplier anywhere in the world to optimize your chip, not just get it to work, but make it completely optimal and give you all the boundless and limitless choices of every source of intellectual property in the world and every process technology and every package technology. And then to manage that complexity, being a lot of us having come from the software industry for design automation, we automated the entire infrastructure of our business so that we have software tools helping us to make those decisions and providing that flexibility to our customers. So as they develop confidence in all the permutations we would allow them to choose from, our differentiation became simply tell us exactly what you want to get done, and we have the software tools that'll tell you the recipe to optimize that. And that's how we work today.
Great. So this basically would mean that you are in the mass customization business and others are as well, but your differentiation is that you are also trying to optimize the mass customization.
We're optimizing the production of the actual chip, and we're also doing it by providing infinitely more information during the architectural phase so that people can make informed decisions about what they want their chip to do. Do they want to focus on power consumption or the performance of the chip or the area of it, which is a proxy for the cost? And we have the ability to let them pick and choose and solve for those outcomes. And by doing so, they can build exactly what they want and know that when it does come out of the factory, it'll work as they had hoped.
Great. And you said before that you wanted to connect the semiconductor business and the internet, so to speak.
Right.
How are you using the internet for delivering this kind of value proposition?
Well, first of all the tools we use internally are available over the internet for our own employees. And we make those readily available to engineers all over the world. We have people literally around the globe. And that's very helpful. It's for great efficiency. But in the last 2 years, we tried something different. You know, we had a set of tools that we thought were particularly valuable to us. And in the spirit of the internet, we said, what if we put those tools out there for free and gave people access to doing things like test chips or production releases into manufacturing with 100% automation? And we've had remarkable response. And it's in our business, in this industry, even though we make all the technology that's the backbone of the internet, we're not very big users of the internet commercially. So we thought we'd reverse that trend. And so if you fast forward to today, we have engineers in over 50 countries around the world using our free tools. And we haven't met 2/3 of them, maybe 80% of them haven't met. We haven't even been into half their countries. But yet people are using their products. And in the last year, we've had the amazing circumstance where when we give people the option of buying from us, they don't have to, and we'll send them a technical worksheet, we'll send them a contract they can sign. About once a quarter, someone actually signs the contract, sends us a purchase order with a check for, on these small test chips, maybe $100,000, and we've never met them. So we're doing $100,000 transactions over the internet with strangers, with doing one of the hardest technical tasks in the world. And so just as a consumer, it gives me great hope of what the future looks like for all of us when it comes to the internet. It just won't be, Amazon or finding directions or doing a search. People will be doing world-class engineering over the internet and among strangers. And for us, of course, we still have to prove the financial viability of our investment, but the early returns are very exciting. And as an entrepreneur, it's what I live for.
Great. So when I look at the product portfolio, besides those kind of mass customized chips, what else could you offer which is also related to this? Because most of the companies are at some point starting with one product category, and then based on the core skills that they generated there or processes, they will extend to another product category.
Yeah, that's a good question, Martin. If you think about the architecture of a chip, and we won't get too technical here, about half of a chip is memory, just memory. And the memory people usually select from suppliers kind of, as we say, off the shelf. You get a memory that fits the chip approximately and is good enough. We have about 250 people who make customized memories. So part of our new product line and our associated differentiation is our intellectual property business. So when we build a chip for somebody, we ask them, once again, what are your goals for that chip? Can we model it on our software that we've developed? And then we solve for what the perfect memory would look like. And then we build that memory. We design that memory for our customers. And so instead of having a memory that's close enough, they get the exact memory that they need. And by doing so, we can increase the performance, we can reduce the power, or we can reduce the size of the memory, therefore lower the price. And so people like that, particularly as chips are getting larger and larger and denser and denser. If you can save 5% of the power consumption or 10% of the area or the cost, that's a huge savings for the marketplace.
Okay. Jack, let's talk about your customers. What type of customer segments are you serving? And when you added other product categories, did you extend this kind of customer segments, or did you try to serve the same customer segments?
So our customer base has evolved over the years. In the early days, we were about half our customers were other startups. The semiconductor business was investing very heavily. The semiconductor industry was investing very heavily in startups. The venture capital available was astonishing, billions of dollars, and a lot of startups would pop up everywhere. And about half our customers were name brand people that you would know, the big logo guys. Over time, that's shifted. The number of startups in the semiconductor world has reduced dramatically, and as the funds for investing in them has shrunk. In fact, there's a major consolidation taking place. So even some of our medium-sized customers are now becoming huge customers combined. And I'd say today, 80 or 90% of our customers are name brand household corporations. And these are the people that make computers, they make routers and switches. We have customers who do consumer products that make hearing aids. We've made customers have made virtually everything under the sun, industrial products, medical products, automotive, and it's been a wide range. But while the technology that we serve has been a very broad spectrum, the type of customer, which you asked about, has shrunk down to the big household names.
Yeah, great. And how did you acquire the first customers? Imagine you just started out, built maybe the first iteration of your processes, and then the younger Jack went out to some customers and trying to close the deal.
So I'll never forget. As a matter of fact, you don't forget your first girlfriend, you don't forget your first customer, right? We a tiny little company that was actually based in India approached us, and they were going to make a machine that was going to accelerate the number of internet transactions that could take place. This was back in, say, 2000, 2001. And I remember the entire negotiation took about 1 hour, contract and all. Because they were a small company looking for help. We're a small company anxious to sign somebody up. And we did. And we thought, okay, we're on our way now. Well, that actually served to help us, not at all, because they were so small and we were too. We then came across a division of one of the world's largest companies called us up here in Silicon Valley, and we knew some of the engineers who knew us personally. Back to that personal connection, that hit record, if you will. And they called us up and said, look, we know your team, we know their reputation, we're looking for someone to help make this chip for us. Could you give us a hand? And we said, we know you're new, but we know you people from other companies, and we've worked with you in other times before, and we're willing to sign you up. And that was our hit record. And after that, that name brand account was enough for everyone else to hear that, well, if they'll buy from you, then we will too. Yeah. And we're on our way. And about every other year thereafter, we pretty much had another hit record account that just accelerated our growth and our credibility. I often talk to other entrepreneurs about this phase of growth, and I refer to it as getting lucky, and not lucky in the sense of random events, but positioning yourself to exploit a good opportunity that comes your way that was not predictable. Mm-hmm. So we've always been very conscious about making sure that when that phone call came from that big guy that we thought we couldn't sell to otherwise, that we were ready to go, that we had the materials to present, that we had the people who could articulate our value, and that we could at least give the perception or the image of a more successful or larger company. And a lot of great companies fail with great business plans, lots of money, great people, and big markets, because they are not prepared for that phone call when it happens, and that one in a lifetime chance just goes right by without them responding. And so we were always very cognizant of that, having many of us had been in our second, third, and fourth startup. We were always ready to look big even when we weren't.
Good. Jack, what have been the major obstacles over the 15, 16 years, and besides the crisis like bubble burst, financial crisis, and so on, and how did you try to cope with it?
Well, you mentioned the big ones, and of course they're true for everybody. It's even though they're somewhat predictable, it's how you respond is of great importance. But I think the single obstacles that we had were not anticipating how quickly our major competitors, who are using their own major factories and their own capital investment, abandoned all of their capital and came to our business model. It seemed like overnight we were competing with some of the largest and best companies in the world in the electronic space, and that caught us off guard. And so we were, in fact, just discussing it the other day. In the first several years of the business, we enjoyed sort of an unfettered access to the market. We were different, we were fresh and new, and we were very nimble. And in the second phase of our growth, kind of the second 5 years, we found ourselves being bombarded by major corporations who actually had picked up our flexibility and nimbleness, and we just didn't have the brand or the cash with which to compete. And I think our response to that was to just double down our efforts on building differentiation. That's how we got into the intellectual property business. We said we need something that's special and different and not easily duplicated, that people say we need to deal with eSilicon for these reasons. So it's been in the last 5 to 7 years we've enjoyed that positioning. We also recognized as the complexity was growing that we would have to accelerate the development of our own internal automated tools to manage the complexity, and that's paying great dividends today. So we responded quickly, but in this business, responding quickly means maybe 3 to 4 years. You can't turn on the proverbial dime. And so now we're enjoying all that investment. But we did go through a period where I felt, looking back today, we were quite flat. We saw what we had to do, we did it, and in semiconductor terms, we did it quickly, but it was a challenging period.
And Jack, you said you didn't expect your competitors to change their business model so quickly. How long did it really take in terms of years? And why do you think was it that quickly? Because most of the startups think, oh, the old guys, they will never change, like maybe in 15 years, but until then I'm big. What was your expectation?
Well, first of all, the companies that had the factories, the big guys, so to speak, they're all excellent firms, and well run and very nimble strategically. And as big companies went, probably moved faster than other big companies, so to speak. We guessed wrong because of the billions of dollars that they had invested in their facilities. Mm-hmm. And what I think, looking back, what I miscalculated wasn't their commitment to what they'd already spent, but their loathing of having to spend it again to stay current. So if they had spent $2 billion to build the infrastructure they were using, they were going to have to spend $4 billion to keep it current. And when they faced that next check to write, they looked around and said, look, these are some small companies out here that are being successful without all this infrastructure. We can do it too. Yeah. And I kept thinking about what they had spent, not versus what they were about to spend, and that's what accelerated their transition to our model and caused them to jettison their infrastructure very quickly.
Understood. Let's talk about your advice to entrepreneurs, because I heard that you are talking at many conferences and about your startup life.
Sure.
What have been the major learnings over the years for you?
Yeah, geez, where to begin?
We have time, so.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if you're doing it for money, don't bother. Because on a risk-adjusted, present value basis, being an entrepreneur is a very low probability of making money. We all hear about, the billion-dollar scores and the people who have had fantastic returns. They're measured as fractions of a person per thousand. Yeah. And the vast majority of startups fail, and of the ones that don't fail, the vast majority of those never have a return, particularly to the entrepreneurs. So you have to be an entrepreneur for the love of it, and you have to make that decision early on. I've seen a lot of people, chase the 1 in a million return, and it's like hitting a home run in the World Series. So you say, I can do it too. I'm going to play baseball, or you're hole in one at the PGA. I'm going to take up golf, but it's that hard. And I've come to learn also that being an entrepreneur is not something you do. It's a state of mind. It's being highly tolerant of ambiguity, of being uncertain about the decisions you're making. It's being comfortable with the contrarian view that you must take in order to create a new market. Otherwise, someone would be there already. And you can't follow someone else into a land of startups because, by definition, they're there. So you also have to be somewhat comfortable anticipating or predicting other complementary innovations that will make your life easier. It's much like, think about, you can take the road on the highway to get from point A to point B, but it's much shorter if you drive across through the woods. Mm-hmm. And you've got to hope that when you get to the river that someone has built a bridge. Yeah. So entrepreneurs think in terms of, I've heard someone's going to build a bridge there, and it makes sense if they build a bridge there, and I know a guy who's investing in building a bridge. It's not there yet, but I'm going to cut across through the woods and beat my competition on the highway because it's a much shorter drive. And then the question is, when you get there, what if the bridge isn't there? Do you say, okay, we're done? Because it's a very viable decision as an entrepreneur to say, this will fail, let's start again. And we'll get back to failure in a moment. Or you say, okay, it turns out the bridge was a half mile down the road. And then you organize your team and you travel down the river for the half mile, and there's the bridge, and it was later than you thought, but you got there anyway. These vagaries and uncertainties have to be part of something that delights you as a human, that does not stress you, and that you have this fundamental belief that you can adapt in times of business trauma. So it's a mindset that really has to be present, and it's not a skill set per se. I mentioned I want to get back to the subject of failure. I talk a lot about entrepreneurship in Europe, mm-hmm. and invariably someone in the audience raises their hand and says, you guys over in Silicon Valley, if you screw up and your company fails, you're even more valuable because you know what not to do the next time. Over here in Europe, if we screw up, we're ruined. So a big variable is to work in a culture that doesn't deem failure to be the end of your value to society or to the industry. You need to start your business in an ecosystem where failure is seen as experience that can be exploited in the future. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's you can do everything right and work in an ecosystem or a culture that the first time you have a setback, your investors or your stakeholders pull the plug. Yeah. It's impossible to win that way. One of my investors said to me early on that his job was to do two things: decide every quarter if I should keep my job, and then make sure I never run out of money. So as long as I kept my job, his job is to make sure I always had money. And he led the $100 million in the first 4 years because we continued to show promise and we continued to give evidence that the market was coming our way. And it's hard to find people outside of the Silicon Valley that will have that forward-looking view. and give you the space you need to fail, recover, and get back in the game. And so I always counsel people to be careful, not just what you start up and with what expectation, but where you start up, so that you have people who understand that it's a high-risk endeavor and that you may not make it on the first pass.
Yeah. Jake, what other type of learnings have you learned along the way?
This is not unique to being a startup, but it's all about the people. I've seen companies, I've invested in companies personally that have had great products and okay people. Mm-hmm. When the product comes out, if it misses the market by 10% one way or the other, it's over. Great people will bring out a product, and if they miss the market by 10%, they'll adjust and get it again. Mm-hmm. Many startups even change their strategy, even their entire business model as they evolve. Great people will make those decisions and accommodate, whereas great products, unless they hit the bullseye, will take you under. And so it's all about the team. And I know that sounds trite, but I've proven it over and over again. Whenever I've made a decision based around anything other than the quality of the person with whom I want to work with, it's been a mistake. And when I've held to my guns about who I want to bring into a company to win based on their success, their knowledge, their character, their willingness to live in an ambiguous environment with lots of uncertainty, has always paid great dividends. So that's a key variable as well.
Great. Jake, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge.
Oh, Martin, my pleasure. Appreciate it.
Welcome. And next time you're thinking about starting a company, think about in what type of ecosystem you want to start, because you will need lots of support along the way and people who will back you up. Thanks.